Alex Eubank started taking TRT and everyone's been criticizing him, but I figured that I might give a more nuanced and unique perspective, considering that I've written a book on Christianity and physical fitness, and Alex Eubank identifies as a Christian. And I don't believe that he's just a nominal Christian either, because in my discussion with Shreds on my other account, Dr. Apolly, Shreds being that guy who looks like, a Greek soldier, like Marcus Aurelius if he existed in the real world, he told me that Alex Eubanks actually helped him become a Christian.
You know Alex Eubank?
Yeah, I know him, yeah.
So I had reached out to him and we spoke on the phone, and I was just asking him about his faith.
So Christianity is certainly a big part of his identity. So, considering I think this video might be relevant to him, I thought I might as well theologically break down Alex Eubank's decision to take TRT. First off, I'd like to thank Alex Eubank for being such a prominent Christian voice in this fitness space. I don't know any other significant Christian influencers, certainly not ones who are as big as Alex Eubank and as outspoken as Alex Eubank, and I thank him for that. It's really good having your voices not just heard, but respected and admired within this scene. Now let's get into the theology. Some people might argue that performance-enhancing drugs aren't sinful. I personally err on the side of caution and believe that performance-enhancing drugs are not in alignment with God's natural design for you. If your body is a temple, as it says in Corinthians, I don't think you should be putting harmful substances in it. Firstly, because it ultimately destroys your body. Secondly, because unnatural substances change the way your body was designed. And third, because you will implicitly either harm people directly or indirectly. I'm going to elaborate on that later. Although I'm no expert in drugs and haven't taken any for myself, I am well read on it, and I believe I do offer at least a well-reasoned perspective on it. In order to assess the degree of sinfulness of it, we have to assess how much of the drug you're actually taking. And not just that, but the actual drug itself. What drug are you taking? How can it be moderated? What are the associated drawbacks? Is this a bioidentical drug like testosterone, or is it not a bioidentical drug like trenbolone? Now, Alex is taking testosterone, so we'll be talking more about that. Trenbolone doesn't naturally exist in the human body, so that would be a categorically different sort of thing as opposed to taking testosterone, which is naturally in the body. But when testosterone is taken exogenously, it's considered unnatural. And this is where testosterone runs into what we will call a teleological issue, which is concerned with how your body is naturally designed. I believe that taking testosterone interrupts and disrupts and almost desecrates the way your body was naturally designed. Taking extra doses of testosterone that your body wasn't designed to handle shrinks your testicles. This is because your testicles are no longer required for testosterone production. In this case, I'm arguing that your body is ceasing to produce and function the way that it was designed to function. The drugs are now taking care of a natural function of your body. This level of bodily adjustment, we can call it, seems sinful to me. And beyond this, you also have to consider how you're actually impacting people with the drugs that you're taking, either implicitly or explicitly. Man is not an island. We have this idea in society that we can just do things and that they don't affect other people. That's just not true. Everything you do, every action you take, either implicitly or explicitly influences people. And every action you do either brings you closer to God or further from God. So I don't think that this is some non-issue that Christians don't have to worry about. You're either implicitly or explicitly calling people to perform like you, even if you yourself do not perform like you do. Now, some people believe that we should be open about our drug use. However, this is just implicitly telling people, or maybe even explicitly telling people, that they should be taking drugs in a bid to perform like you. This is of course hurting their bodies in the process. Your incredible looks and performance have normalized the idea of taking drugs in their head, and made it even seem glamorous to them. You may tell them that drug abuse is bad, but if you're taking it yourself, they're not going to heed your warning. People look up to you, and they want to become like you. They see you as aspirational, and part of what it takes to become like you is to take drugs. And we see this in the huge surge of people who have started taking performance-enhancing drugs. I mean, when I came on the scene back in like 2018, 2019, when I first made my Instagram account, people were questioning whether I was natural or not. Nowadays, I get comments of people telling me I'm small. Like, what happened? Everyone started taking drugs. When you normalize something in their head, they start to feel more comfortable taking it. Steroids, and especially TRT, are no longer this back alley drug. We've clinicalized it. It's something all your parasocial internet friends take. And it's so cool to them. It makes them feel manly and all that stuff. Now, if you hide it and don't speak about it, people will become resentful that your ostensibly natural body is performing all these incredible Herculean feats of strength when they actually aren't. When your body actually isn't. It's the drug that's supercharging your body that's helping you do it. Tristan Lee, for example, never talks about his drug use, but I mean, it's obvious that he's on drugs if you just look at him and if you look at his performance. But if you don't know any better, you might get jealous of the fact that he's doing all this stuff and he's ostensibly natural. The same thing happened in the 80s and 90s with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Maybe it was 70s, I forget. With Arnold Schwarzenegger. People thought he was natural until he started coming out and saying, guys, I'm not natural, what are you talking about? And then all the high expectations started to go away. But before then, people genuinely looked at Arnold Schwarzenegger in these movies and all these bodybuilding competitions and like, yeah, I can become like that if I just do push-ups in my room every day. So it just seems as though you either risk physically hurting someone or psychologically hurting someone. Pick your poison, I guess. There's a new angle people are trying to use nowadays to justify TRT use by claiming that it's actually necessary. The argument goes something like this. Since testosterone naturally occurs in your body, it means that it's good to have it, which is true. But this doesn't justify taking it exogenously, which I've already covered. But they bring up important facts about how testosterone is declining every year, or I believe it's every decade, it's going down by 10%. And this is also true, and it's also an important issue. And they also bring up how testosterone declines as you get older. So I'm going to tackle both of these issues. Firstly, just because society has declining testosterone doesn't mean that you should be taking exogenous testosterone. Your ancestors didn't take exogenous testosterone, so why don't you just emulate whatever your ancestors were doing to make sure that their testosterone levels were at a higher level. Be it our food or our lifestyle, how about you advocate for changing our foods and our lifestyle as opposed to advocating for taking exogenous testosterone? At the very least, that should be your first line of defense. You shouldn't be advocating for taking drugs to make up for poor lifestyle choices. That's just an emasculate way, ironically, of solving the testosterone problem. And I mean, nature has set itself up such that it works harmoniously. Natural problems, generally speaking, can be fixed by having natural solutions. If you try and fix natural problems with unnatural solutions, oftentimes you'll have unintended consequences. As for your testosterone levels declining as you get older, this is literally not true. All the studies you can find about testosterone levels declining as you get older are fake. Listen to me, they are fake. Well, maybe I won't go that far, but they don't account for things like lifestyle changes. Getting married and having kids plummets your testosterone levels because your body is telling yourself now that you need to be monogamous and you shouldn't be sleeping around more and that you want to be gentle around your kids and, that sort of stuff. It's basically a defense mechanism for keeping your marriage intact. Because marriage is a natural institution and that every society pretty much, don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure every society has acknowledged it. Acknowledge this male and female dynamic. And of course, older people are more likely to be married than younger people. There's also the fact that poor diets, being overweight, and smoking also plummets your testosterone levels, and older people are much more likely to have at least a history of that sort of stuff compared to younger people. So when you account for all of that, your testosterone levels don't actually decrease after you turn 30. Your testosterone levels do not decrease after you turn 30 due to natural aging processes. I repeat, your testosterone levels do not decrease after 30 due to natural aging processes. I'm open to the idea that when you get really old, when you're, a year away from passing away, then your testosterone levels might decline because then everything else in your body, everything about you in general, your mind, your body, everything is declining and it's getting ready to die. So maybe in like your early 80s, your testosterone level declines for a little bit. But no, if you're in your mid 60s, it's the same as in your early 60s. In your 50s, it's the same as in your 40s. Your 40s is the same as in your 30s. This myth that we've all come to believe is maybe one of the most dangerous ideas in the entire fitness industry. But sure, for the sake of argument, let's just say that your testosterone levels do decline after you turn 30 and then just keeps declining until you die. Let's just say that's true for the sake of argument, even though, again, there's actually no proof of this existing. Let's just say it's true for the sake of argument. Why are you so afraid of being old? There have been billions of men who have been old before you, and they've been perfectly fine with it, and it's worked for them. Their life, their testosterone levels have worked for them. Why are you an exception? This is just a natural part of living, just accept it. A lot of things happen when you get older, they just have to accept. If you start balding really bad, just go bald, or just embrace your white hair. Your athleticism declines when you get older, so there's no point in hanging on to this idea of being 20 years old, having the athleticism of being 20 years old when you're 65. You're just gonna seem delusional. Women who get all these crazy plastic surgeries when they're 65 in order to look like they're 23, we also berate them, justifiably so if you ask me. So, why are we not doing the same to ourselves? I don't know. Father time comes for everyone. When you get really old and your athleticism goes away and your physicality in general just goes away, just make sure you're right with God and make sure you're right with your family and that's what you should really be focusing on at that point. Nevertheless, with all this being said, I do believe that there are two God-fearing Christians who could have differing opinions on this. I know people in my life who disagree with me on this. They believe that taking these drugs is fine, and I believe that they are genuine Christians. Their heart is for God. This might be something that you ultimately defer to your conscience on, as it says also in Corinthians. I'll have the Bible verse up. Like many things that aren't outright condemned in the Bible, this might just depend on your regenerated conscience. So that's another perspective you can have. So with all this being established, I would say that there's 4 very circumscribed reasons that you could consider taking drugs and it wouldn't be sinful. The first one is war, and war is about winning or losing. If we need to get people more aggressive, and by doing that we inject some testosterone in them in order to do that, then I'm actually fine with that. Second is police. Same sort of thing. They're dealing with a bunch of extremely volatile criminals. If they need to use testosterone to get a little bit of an edge, get a bit more aggressive, then I'm okay with that as well. It's for the safety, the greater good of society. 3 is medical necessity. You know, if your testosterone levels are actually dangerously low naturally, and you've done everything naturally to increase it, but they're just still dangerously low, like 50 nanograms per deciliter or something, which is extremely rare, but it could happen, then your body isn't functioning properly, then I would suggest, yeah, you could probably take TRT if you really need it. And the last one is a sports necessity, but I will give this one an asterisk. The sports necessity only really applies if you are already in a position where you could be or are making a lot of money off your sports performance, and there's no other choice really for you. So think of these football players who come from really bad backgrounds. The alternative for them is to live in squalor, live in a terrible living condition, or they could take drugs and get rich and escape their terrible circumstances. I think that very, very circumscribed predicament could justify you taking performance-enhancing drugs. Now let's ask, does Alex fit any of those 4 criteria? No, he doesn't. His testosterone levels are fine, even though he doesn't feel good. His testosterone levels are actually fine. He's just super lean all the time, and he can just fix that by eating more. Even if his testosterone levels were low, if he just ate more, then he'd be fine. So no, he does not have a medical necessity to do this. And of course, he's not in the military, he's not with the police, and he doesn't need it for sports. He says in the video that he's doing it for himself, which strikes me as biblical pride. If you watch the video, he talks a lot about how people keep calling him weak and small, and now he wants to not be called that. Even though right before that, he says that he's doing it for himself, but what are you gonna do? He also works out in a place with a lot of meat heads, a lot of juice heads. So that probably also inclines him to think, oh, I should probably take this thing too. Hey, my camera just died, so I kind of forgot what I was talking about, but I believe I was talking about how he's envious of other people and how he's training with other people and how they're all big and how he isn't. But he also says he's doing it for himself, so the motivations are kind of muddy. But even if we assume that he's doing it for himself, it still feels as though he's pridefully doing it for himself, because now he's desecrating God's creation, God's temple, his body, just because he wants to prove something to himself. He's even saying that he wants to do this because he wants to become the best version of himself. But theologically understood, taking exogenous drugs in order to ostensibly improve yourself is not becoming the best version of yourself. It's actually diverting entirely from who God made you to be, especially in regards to a drug or a hormone as important as testosterone. Are you saying that God didn't naturally make you manly enough? I hope not. That's extremely disrespectful to say to your creator. The tea he had was directly in accord to how much tea God designed him to have. God gave him the tools to naturally maximize it, and he could choose to maximize it if he wanted to, but he just decided to take it exogenously. He's saying, God, I don't want the masculinity that you gave me. I want my masculinity from this bottle or from this needle or from this pill. I don't know how it's taken. I know Alex is saying that he's doing this in a healthy way, but that's almost a contradiction in terms, because you can't take dangerous drugs that you're not meant to take healthily. It's the equivalent of drunk driving safely. Like, I suppose you can wear a seatbelt and drunk drive, and it'll be more safe than if you didn't wear a seatbelt, but the act itself is inherently risky and reckless. The worst part is, he doesn't need to do this. He could decide to eat more food, and he even acknowledges this in the video. He could decide to eat more food, but he adamantly refuses to bulk. I get why. I mean, his business model is to stay lean and aesthetic, and if he started bulking, that would take away from that. At least temporarily, he would have to go through phases where he bulks, and then he doesn't have this brand of being this Greek god aesthetic. But yeah, as a natural, you can't just stay small and aesthetic and keep growing in perpetuity. You're gonna have to bulk at some point. So he can either eat food and get away from his branding and go off script a little to get bigger, or he can just take drugs and keep his branding, and I suppose he decided to go the latter. He says in the video that he's reached his genetic limit, but that is not true at all. He just wants to stay lean specifically, and he needs to take drugs in order to keep growing muscle and staying lean. Now, I don't want to psychoanalyze him too much based off the few videos I've seen of him, and, you know, I've never actually met him, so I mean, how can I really say this much about him? But based off what I've seen, he is doing things to a level of pleasing man that is certainly unbefit of someone who espouses himself as a Christian. Now, even if you disagree with my position that taking drugs, aside from under very specific circumstances, is inherently sinful, you'd have to at least admit that his motive for taking drugs in this specific scenario does err towards a side of sinful intent. He says he's been training for 8 years, which is a long time for most people, but among the really big naturals I know, the freaky naturals, the natural champions in natural bodybuilding competitions, they've been training for like well over 10 years. And not to mention, in those 10 years, they have been bulking and cutting, which he refuses to do. Not even just bulking and cutting, but they've just been eating more food and being at points where they aren't super lean all the time, and he refuses to not be super lean all the time. He refuses to get above like 160, 165 pounds. So if he decided to bulk and he decided to be patient, he could get there. I believe he really could. I think he has good genetics, but he just doesn't want to, and he does not. Patience is a very important value, very important virtue for Christians, and he doesn't have the opportunity to practice it in this sense anymore, and it's just unfortunate. Alex is a really big figure, and I have no idea what it's like being in that kind of spotlight. My success compared to his is extremely modest, but perhaps my perspective can offer a more level-headed view of things for him. Alex, if you're listening to this, if you're watching this video, please reconsider taking this testosterone that you're taking. I would highly suggest you get off immediately and start training natural again. I hope I at least gave you something to think about in this video, from one muscular Christian to another.